excited as I am. My name's Liam. I am one of the Hosted brothers here. I'm here with my good friend, the founder of the Haste Club, Christopher Bell. Guys, we've got two special guests on today. They don't need no introduction, but you know what? We have Anpanman and we have Stock Meetups. Chris, this is a mad stream. What are you thinking?
We've got some we've got some heavy hitters on here today. And we've been talking with these guys for the better part, nearly a week now, and I've been so excited, so hyped up, because I know I'm going to learn a lot, and that's why we do this, right? I know we're going to learn a lot. And look, just before we jump right into this, there's an elephant in the room, when it comes to ASTS and Rocket Lab, and you're always going to find a few people on X that's going to want to argue with you and want to get into like a big debate. We're not going to be debating the two companies here. We're coming to learn, and we might not be talking too much about Rocket Lab. These guys know ASTS upside and down, and the great thing about them is they're very open and honest. And if I asked them for a bear case, they would both be able to give me one and not hold back, and show me the numbers and be, that's why they're great investors. Because there's an argument, right, between ASTS and Rocket Lab shareholders that often stems from basically just oversimplification or just complete misunderstanding of the two companies and their roles in the space industry. Both of them operate in different sectors, with both of them with different business models. Space is massive. There's plenty of room in space for both of them to succeed. And that reminded me of something I saw earlier on Reddit, where these guys were arguing over, and it was ignorant. You take two steps back and realize how ignorant this is. But the guy posted that SpaceX makes the most reliable rockets ever. And then some guy comes on there and says that I've seen SpaceX products explode more than Honda products. What does Honda have to do with SpaceX? Right? They're in different worlds. They're in different sectors. They have different goals. So again, it does come down to kind of, almost ignorance to constantly compare one company, two companies. It doesn't matter. I love what SpaceX does. I love what Rocket Lab does. I do make fun of Astra. I kind of deserve that one. But I'm behind all of it. And the great thing about today is that I can admit that I was wrong, 100% wrong about ASTS. And I'm going to learn more today about why I was wrong. And I'm hoping that along those ways, we'll learn more from people in the chats, as we always do, and we'll bring some people from one side or the other, and maybe make a few friends and unite the two companies. I don't know, but we're definitely not going to debate, man. We're here to have fun as always. Thanks again, guys, for coming on. That's all I had for that, man. Liam, you go ahead and take it over. Let's let these guys take it over. I'm excited.
Yeah, I don't think we'd be right without actually, before we getting into it, actually just getting to know these guys. So, Anpanman, how are we getting on? How has your week been, brother?
I'm good. As you guys know, I live in New York, and we've had a heat wave here, but it's getting better. But yeah, I can't complain. I mean, with the stock price doing well, and it seems like a lot of pieces that are falling into place. It's a very, I have very positive feelings right now. But I wanted to compliment you on that introduction. It sounded like some type of like action movie thriller beginning. It got me pumped up. So looking forward to having this conversation. But yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, and happy to discuss AST SpaceMobile and even delve into the whole I guess debate between the AST and Rocket Lab, which to me makes no sense, but happy to talk about that too, and the genesis, or part of the genesis behind that. But yeah, looking forward to talking with all of you today.
Thank you so much. And guys, if you haven't, and I'm pretty sure every one of you know who Anpanman is, but if you haven't, make sure on X to follow him. His handle is just below his name there. Then Stock Meetups. Same question. How are you, my guy? How has your week been?
Doing excellent. The weather in Seattle is great, and there's a lot of things happening in the Senate on big, beautiful bill. If it gets passed, it will even jumpstart the entire space industry to the next level. I'm super excited. I'm an investor in Rocket Lab and ASTS. Thanks to Anpanman, I learned a lot about SPACs. So when the SPACs got merged, both for RKLB and ASTS, I invested some initial amount of money. I purchased some of the warrants. It was always used to be very, very hard to understand what a warrant is. So I used to ping Anpanman every few weeks or few days. Hey, so what happens when this warrant expires or comes to the the exercise options and etc. So it's been like a lot of fun ride, and I feel him. I treat him as my mentor. I learned quite a bit about the valuation, etc. I really believe that the space stocks like ASTS, RDW, Rocket Lab, Lunar, they'll I really wish all of them to go well. There's no debate, nothing between these groups. All of them are trying to solve different problems. There are many problems in space and tech industry, and as well as how the wars and the technology will be used in the wars we have seen in the Iran-Israel war, Ukraine wars. So there's a lot of exciting stuff in this space.
Thank you so much, my guy. And now, what I'm going to say, guys, is chat. Don't be afraid to get involved in this. We're a little bit different around here. What we like to do, we like to engage the chat. You have any questions for either myself, Chris, but most importantly for Anpanman and Stock Meetups, whether it's ASTS, Rocket Lab, whole space industry, or you just want to get to know the guys, feel free to jump into the chat there. As long as you're respectful, your question will be asked. So I'm going to address one elephant in the room. Liam from the Hustle Brothers knows absolutely nothing about ASTS. So this is going to be a walkthrough of the whole ASTS business, as much as we can get through as best basis. But I want to start with Anpanman. What initially got you into investing, number one, and then why ASTS? Like, what encouraged you to go down that route?
Yeah, so I guess I got to go back quite a bit. Out of university, I went into investment banking, and so my first job was corporate finance and M&A. I covered the tech industry, and so I worked on financings, IPOs, follow-ons, converts, debt financings, but also M&A deals. And this was in Silicon Valley for a number of years. And then after my tour of duty, I actually moved over to the buy side and moved over to the investing side of the world. So I worked as a hedge fund portfolio manager for a number of years doing long, short, event-driven investing. And then after doing that for well over a decade, I decided to basically retire. I have two small kids, and I wanted to spend more time with them, and I was able to, fortunately, at a point in my life, really spend more time with them, and I had accumulated enough wealth where I didn't, need to work a day job or a 9 to 5 type of job. And so I left the industry, and that actually coincided with COVID. So like after I left, COVID happened. And of course, we all know what happened during that period of time. During 2020, SPACs kind of blew up with rates at zero, and there was a lot of money sloshing around, and obviously a lot of people at home with nothing to do on their hands but speculating on the markets. It was a kind of a perfect cocktail, which then led to the SPAC boom. And so over that period of time, I think it was the summer of 2020, I started becoming more involved in SPACs, and as part of the speculative side, there was quite a few of us who would dumpster dive on LinkedIn and other sources of information to see like who is connected to who in terms of sponsors, and what potential deals might these sponsors go after. And so I came across this one SPAC, which was New Providence Acquisition Corp, NPA. That company had two executives that had exposure to consumer products industry, but also telecom. And so I actually bought my first shares in NPA and warrants back in September of 2022. September 2020. And then a short few months later in December, they announced this deal with AST SpaceMobile to take them public. And so that was my, just by luck, candidly, that was my first introduction to the company. And so I had, when they announced that deal, I think it was on a weekend, I looked at, or just prior to the weekend, I looked at the presentation deck, and it was really interesting what the company was doing. So, I've had background in technology, and I've also invested in the technology and telecom sectors. Like I had a lot of familiarity with, Verizon, AT&T, PCS, Sprint, all these companies, the precursor to and T-Mobile, of course, and so I had familiarity with that sector and even Globalstar. Like I had invested in Globalstar at one point in time. I remember that was a big spectrum play, and quite candidly, that really hasn't changed much. But I had a lot of familiarity with the history of satellite, communications. And so when I learned about what AST SpaceMobile was doing around bringing, these novel large phased array satellites, a very ingenious way to fold them up into standard fairing, but get that out in space. And what they were planning to do is communicate with unmodified phones. And so using cellular spectrum to communicate with your day-to-day phone is a very novel idea, right? And so by utilizing these very large phase arrays that can send down a significant amount of power, they were able to communicate with existing phones today. And so I thought it was a pretty novel idea. It's at the time it seemed to make a ton of sense, but also like a very risky idea as well. But then when you looked at the company's strategic partners and investors that they were developing the technology alongside, you had at the time Vodafone, Rakuten, American Tower. Who else was there? There were a number of strategic players. They were partnered with AT&T. They had an exclusive agreement at that point in time. But they were working with all these companies, Nokia, and Safran and a few others. And so to me, it seemed like not only an interesting novel idea, but then one that was properly backed by these strategic partners who had engineers who had diligenced the technology, figured out that it could work, and also since 2017/18 had been embedded with the company and were helping develop it, because this is not a solution that you can develop on your own. You actually need the MNO, mobile network operators help to actually integrate it into the back end core of their systems. And so, yeah, that was my first introduction in 2020. And as I continued to do diligence on the name, I just became more and more bullish over time. And along that way, I met a number of other people, whether that was the Kook Report, Steve Larison, there's a whole host of Space Mob, Katsy has been a critical member, someone who has a technology background, but also, a deep understanding in radio frequencies, RF engineering. And so, by leveraging the Space Mob over time, it's been great community to basically grow together with, because I don't think anyone would have had the same level of conviction through the positive times, but obviously during the difficult times, like when the stock was, below $2 at the beginning of 2024. But I don't think anyone would have had the conviction to hold if it weren't for this amazing community and the amount of due diligence that they've done, and quite candidly, the friendships as well. And so that's a very long-winded answer of how I got into investing, how I came across AST SpaceMobile, and kind of, I guess, where we are today.
It makes a lot of
Thank you
sense.
so much for
It
that.
makes a lot of sense. It's almost like having a rocket scientist for a best friend when you want, deep, really deep info on how Rocket Lab builds their rockets. You're on the satellite side because you have real world experience. That makes a big difference when
That's right.
when you're evaluating a company when it comes to stuff. And it sounds like you've got a lot of experience in different areas, not just sitting behind a computer. I mean, you're well involved.
Yeah,
I appreciate that,
think
man. That means a lot, because it says that what you're doing is not just coming from, hey, I'm just looking at some numbers on a spreadsheet and I really like this company because I just like it. no, you're applying a real world application there. That now I got more questions. We're gonna have to do this again soon. But that was awesome,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I will just say that I think, and the Rocket Lab community has, similar characteristics as well. But I think it's important in the day and age of, social media and investing, where you can build relationships with people and leverage, due diligence. It's super helpful to have basically people from all walks of life, right? So in the Space Mob, there's people from finance, there's lawyers, there's also people who do production, there's people who have engineering backgrounds, space, any number of areas. And so what I find interesting is that oftentimes when I worked at a hedge fund, there's smart, bright people there, but you can only dig so deep and you can only know so much about a specific name, because you're typically in a diversified portfolio. You're probably looking at 30 to 40, 50 names at any point in time, looking to cycle into ideas, cycle out of them. Whereas here with SpaceMob, like, you're solely focused on one name, and you bring people from different disciplines to bear on a company. And so, hey, I don't understand production. Like, how long will it take to ramp up, or how quick can an ASIC be spun up? And so there's people like, hey, from the semiconductor industry, like someone who understands fabless design and how long it'll take to get the semiconductor through its paces at TSMC. And so it's super helpful, because I think what SpaceMob has demonstrated, and you see this actually, whether it's with institutional investors like Hennessy Funds, which is a loan-only investor, they will tell you that they've learned a lot from the crowdsourcing of due diligence from SpaceMob. But then also, if you look at sell side reports, oftentimes various SpaceMob will be quoted in those reports, which I find kind of funny. But yeah, I think it's transformative, and you'll see this in other investment names too, where by crowdsourcing due diligence, you're able to draw upon a lot of areas of expertise, and then draw your own conclusions about whether an investment's a good idea or not.
Thank you so much for that. And then Stock Meetups, what got you first involved in ASTS?
During the SPAC boom in 2021 and 2022, these were some of the names, the Rocket Lab, and ASTS, and the Virgin, the Galactic, and all those things.
Did you get into that?
Yeah, I mean, you just burned some of the money there. It's fine. So I distributed the money, but then I was also stuck in SoFi for a long time, because at least half of my investment was in SoFi. But yeah, since they also had to reset their business, and they have to rebuild their entire business case, so I was finding, okay, what is my next bet to ensure that I have a balanced portfolio apart from the SPY, etc. And I saw there's a lot of momentum back in ASTS. And last year, when the stock was at the very lowest, it was trading around $2 or so, I added more into that, as well as the Rocket Lab. Then I used to read a lot from the Cook Report, the CATC and King Tut, the AST Space Odyssey, and the AST SpaceMob, AST Investor. There are like a lot of folks, right? And then I also saw some of those things in Jacob, and a lot of other folks. Then as I learned more and more, and especially the pivotal moment was then when they launched the BB-1s, the first set of rockets, the satellites, which was a pivotal moment for the stock to have a little bit of bump. Then when I saw that, okay, AT&T is a great investor, Google is an investor, Verizon, Vodafone, and Rakuten, and American Tower. I'm saying, all these people are not fools to invest so big into it. Then when everyone started doing the alpha test, I'll call them as alpha test, where you have this 5 satellites, which is just covering some part of it. This technology is a little hard to grok first. It took some time for me why this is different than Starlink and Kuipers and other constellations which are happening. They are trying to build the massive network. right? But for them, the biggest problem is in terms of coverage, and you need to have, right? So, but ASTS on the other hand, they're trying to complement and try to use the spectrum of mobile operators. So when I saw,
Did we lose him?
I think we may have lost Stock Meetups.
He
What
might
I'm
have
gonna do?
just. He might have muted himself.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, yeah, he just
Yeah.
muted himself.
Yeah. So till what time you heard? Hello?
Oh
Are you
no,
able to hear me?
actually, no, you were laying it out pretty well there.
I think you got cut
Okay.
off when you were saying that they're using cellular spectrum.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Oh
They're
yeah,
using the
Spectrum.
cellular spectrum, and they're trying to complement the MNOs. And these folks have done amazing deals with 3.2 billion MNO. I mean, so several MNOs which are covering 3.2 billion customers. And even if you have 10% rate, or even if they get 5% of those users convert them, it's a huge TAM. And the beauty of it was when I tried to understand this tech was when I saw the video of CEO Abel with Faris Zakaria. He clearly articulates the entire tech in a very simple layman terms. That's when it got, oh, so what's happening here is you have like a lot of these towers across for the current MNOs, and there are many dead zones where there's no coverage. This BB2s and BB1s will actually complement. They are the cell towers in the space. So that means, so like wherever you have the dead zone, those dead zones will be covered by, like whenever the BB2 gets launched in the space. That made me understand, oh, this is, and this guy is not some, like Tom, Dick, and Harry. He already understands, because he had a previous company called Emerging Communication Technologies. He built that company in early 2000. He sold it in 2015 for 500 million. He tried to solve a lot of communication tech problems in Africa, as well as even the submarine, right? So submarine is kind of a little complex tech. So this guy understands, and he also worked, if I'm not wrong, in Ericsson. That made me really understand, okay, possibly this guy is a good bet to bet on, because he's a founder-led CEO, and he is really investing in trying to solve. So that led me into go bigger onto this. And the more and more I see the projections of this company, it's huge TAM. Yeah, I mean, can they fail? They say so. Possibly they can hit some hiccups. For example, they are testing everything in their bigger labs, but when they actually send it to the space, these BB2s, and you have a lot of connections to be tested, I mean, you may hit some performance issues, etc. So that's where they are trying to scale up, like one at a time, right? So, and next month will be possibly huge for them, because they might be launching their BB2 soon. So, pretty excited.
Thank you so much for that very detailed response, the two of you guys. So now, what I want to get into, and it's up to whichever one of you want to jump in on this. Look, I've said it from the start. I am only learning about ASTS. I was fully aware of them. I think my other hustle brother, Race, actually, it was one of our first videos on the channel, was AST SpaceMobile. And I think at
Was
the
it
time,
really? Was that? Is that true?
Yeah, his first video was ASTS.
You're gonna hear "I told you so," "I told you so," "I told you so" for days. We probably owe Reese a pint or two. I know I owe Francisco and Johnny. I know I owe them big time. It's something we've discussed in the chats quite a bit, and I'll be honest. I thought it looked great for the short term. It did. It looked great for the short term, and I got sucked into a lot of the negative trolling and stuff like that, and I was one of those guys that was like, hey, man, what about launch? Yeah, you can build all the satellites you want, but how are you going to get them into space? So screw you guys, man. Rocket Lab to the moon. I was honestly I wasn't like mean about it, but that's just how my thought process, because I was ignorant. Which is ironic, because the thing we do preach here every single show is that just do your research. You can listen to an Anpanman, you can listen to a stocks meetup, you can listen to my dumbass if you want to. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can. But regardless of what stock it's going to be, do your own research, because don't make the mistakes that I made. And that's a lot of the reason why we're doing this. Again, like I say all the time, I've got kids. I'm trying to teach them. I'm old. I got into investing late, so I'm learning. And that's exactly what we have these guys on here to teach us, day in and day out, day in and day out. I never thought we'd be able to keep a daily going like this, but there's so much out there to learn. And it doesn't have to be, about an ASTS, but thankfully, luckily, we have these guys on here that can teach us a lot more, because I think I might have missed a boat on this one, man. That's that's gonna a hard pillar to swallow, it's a hard pillar to swallow, but yeah, thanks again, man. I'll say it like 3 or 4 more times. Thanks for coming on.
So we all are learning from each other, right? I learned a lot about Rocket Lab from Rocket Lab Investor Group, right? I learned that, okay, they have launched 4, like 4 launches this time for the first time in a month. So they're also scaling up. I'm also super bullish what's going what's in store for them. And at the same time, like whatever is happening with the big beautiful bill and the golden dome, even like Rocket Lab will have its amazing day. So same thing for many other growth stocks. We are all here, learn and share. At the same time, we have a strong components from the hedge funds who always try to short, right? So we are always learning each other and move the needle.
Yeah, so I want to jump in there and kind of say that was kind of where my question was going. I think Chris hit the nail on the head there. And guys in the chat, I'm sorry, I feel like I've been neglecting you. I just want to get this question out to the guys, and then we will start addressing the chat. Because if not, we're just going to have to backpedal. So I said, Reese did cover ASTS very early on. And then, just like Chris, I just got excited about launch. And look, if you can't get the satellite up there, what you're going to do? I was just naive at the time. I was ignorant. And then when I started getting deeper and deeper into Rocket Lab, I'm starting realizing like space system side is actually the most profitable part of the business. And again, guys, what are we investing for? Everyone can be a fan. I'm a fan of, I don't know, Arsenal Football Club, but it doesn't mean I'm invested in them. And that's where I'm going with my question is, look, for any of you guys in the chat that are diehard ASTS, we will get into some of the more technical things. But I'm going to start off with Anpanman. What does ASTS actually do?
Yeah, so AST SpaceMobile, if you can imagine, they're building a next generation communications platform in space that can connect through cellular and MSS spectrum at any 3G PV compatible device. And so not only does that mean like your standard cell phone, which will be able to work through probably 1, maybe 2 walls of your house, because we're using terrestrial cellular spectrum, the low band stuff that Verizon and AT&T use that gives you really great coverage. But they're also going to be able to connect to IoT devices, anything that's connected, cars, trucks, imagine drones, warfighters. I mean, whether it's on the consumer side of applications or military, anything that needs connectivity. And that includes, whether you're in an area where there is coverage, or you're in an area where there's dead zones, most importantly, right? And so if you can imagine like a connected world in the future where you have all these IoT devices, autonomous cars and trucks that need to be connected all the time, that connectivity needs to be there 100%. Whether, today wireless carriers will tell you that they cover 98% of the population, but that's only where population currently works or lives. That doesn't, like in the US, that doesn't include all these areas that are not built out for cell towers. And so if you look at the US, I think there's like 35% of the country is not covered by cellular towers. And so those are the areas that AST SpaceMobile will cover. But also, when people think about that, they think of like the desert or the mountains. But if you go out to the Hamptons or on the beach on Long Island, there's plenty of dead spots there as well. And so those are areas that AST SpaceMobile will cover too. And so if you can imagine for the MNOs, this is like a great tool for them because they not only get to leverage spectrum that's not being used where they haven't built out coverage, but then also if you can think about like going to your customer and saying, hey, we're going to give you 100% guaranteed coverage across the US, but also several miles off the coast of the US. And for that guaranteed coverage, you pay whatever it is, $10, $20 more a month, and you'll get that broad. And it's not just, emergency text messaging, but it's broadband coverage. I think a lot of people are going to pay for that, right? Because as I mentioned before, I have two small children. They both have Apple Watches. If my wife finds out that I didn't pay an extra $20 a month to make absolutely sure that I can track them no matter where they are, or to call them, she'll kill me, right? It's like 2 cups of coffee at Starbucks. And so I just, when people are skeptical about whether or not folks will pay for this, I find it kind of funny because it's like an insurance policy, right? Like people pay a premium to buy a 4-wheel drive SUV just for the potential of them needing to go off road or maybe going through a snowstorm of that 1 to 2% of time, in the year. Whereas I think like, especially if you're a remote worker, especially, like for me, I need to be connected to markets. It's the most brutal thing when you don't have coverage and you're spending time with your family, whether it's, camping. I see wherever Chris is in the outdoors over there, he probably experiences dead zones too. But imagine being able to have that connectivity. And so that's on the consumer side. And then moving over to the military use case, which was not really part of the story because the company was working on it, but then they weren't very outward about it. But this is something that over the last 2 years has come to more of the fore, which is the Connected Warfighter program, using satellites as PNT, basically augmenting GPS. Also using these large phased arrays in low Earth orbit to basically act as secondary type of radar. There's a whole host of applications, and I'll add to that electronic warfare as well, which there's a Bloomberg article that just came out now, which I'll share with everyone. But imagine, if you're, whether it's on cellular frequencies or satellite frequencies, if you need to go into a war zone and basically take down an adversary's cellular network, these large phased arrays with a lot of power, they might be able to help you in that area, which, that's not something that the company will talk about, but it's surely something that, the military is probably evaluating. And, there's been some speculation about whether or not they were involved in Iran, which I don't think they were at this point in time, but it's something that the company can do in the future. But yeah, there's a whole host of applications for this, and then when we talk about the opportunity, there's 3 pillars. There's consumer, which is working in partnership with the MNOs. As I mentioned before, they'll offer their customers this new service. They'll split the revenues 50-50, and that will reduce churn. It will reduce customer acquisition costs. If T-Mobile is partnering with Starlink and they're offering inferior service, Verizon and AT&T are licking their chops, right? Because they're going to be able to take subs from T-Mobile. But then also from a carrier perspective, if you can imagine not having to build out cell towers in these areas where it doesn't make economic sense. And so there's a big CapEx savings story in that area. And then, as I mentioned before, there's military, which, there's various use cases there, which if you really want to dig deeper, you can always read all the different Twitter threads that Katsi posts. And then finally, government use. And so after 9/11, when FirstNet was created, because during the terrorist attacks, no one could get through either to loved ones on their cell phones because the network was inundated, but more importantly, first responders, whether that was firefighters or police officers, they couldn't communicate with each other or with folks who were organizing rescue efforts because the cell networks were just completely inundated with too much traffic. And so FirstNet was created out of the 9/11 attacks and funded with, I think it was over $18 billion at the time, So FirstNet is the FirstNet is a first responder network here in the U.S. It's a totally separate network from AT&T's commercial network, and that solely is devoted to providing communications for first responders in emergencies. And so AST SpaceMobile is working with FirstNet. If you can imagine a situation where let's say like the hurricane where a lot of cell towers were taken down, AST SpaceMobile, the Bluebird satellites can light up that spectrum in that affected area and provide data connectivity to first responders, but also victims who are trying to get help. And so that's one big killer app that I think has started here in the US. We know FirstNet is testing with AST SpaceMobile. There was a presentation last week about it. Perhaps there'll be a contract and funding at some point in first half of next year. But that's another what we call like a third pillar, which I think you'll see that expanded. Singapore just signed a partnership with AST, and you'll probably see Europe through the Vodafone joint venture that build out some type of system that's similar to FirstNet for Europe. But yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell what AST does. It's a communications platform that's going to connect to any standard 3G PPV device and provide broadband connectivity, and that's a very valuable service. We often talk about like how NVIDIA started off as a graphics chip company, but then because of that computing power, it was leveraged into AI, big data, all these other applications. And I think similarly with AST, once the constellation is up and communications platforms there's going to be all kinds of interesting applications built on top of it, some of which we haven't contemplated today.
And then
you know what
go on.
There's a reason why if you were walking to a room and I'm the smartest person in there, go find the room that this guy's in and hang out in there. That was freaking brilliant. I love that. And I stopped talking, man, because I can't take notes fast enough because I've got more and more questions. This is amazing. I'm so happy to have you guys on. Just the word spectrum. And I do have just one quick question. Stock meetups, if you don't mind. When it comes to spectrum, I know that we've been talking about different possibilities of spectrum in the Rocket Lab community. If you got a minute or two just to give, like, is there, I mean, and nothing, not as far, no competition against ASTS, obviously, but again, this guy's got me thinking.
Anpanman can explain more about the spectrum part. I was more interested on the FNER because the FNER conference happened in the city where I live in Bellevue last month. So where when I attended and just did a small survey of all the attendance people or the suppliers, they were actually, many of them were super psyched up with the opportunity from AST because right now, if you see what happened, right, either the fires which happen in LA or the hurricanes which happens. So if a FirstNet responder has to go to the place, etc., and many of the internet connectivity and some of the towers or some of the signals may not work because what happened there, right? But with ASTS for FirstNet, your mobile can connect if things work out as expected, right? Then things will become so smoother, so people can respond to things super quick and super fast. It will become very seamless. The other thing which I was even super psyched up was where for the defense sector in Hawaii last week, there was a joint the demonstration between AST and Fairwinds for the tactical assault kits where they tested for the key defense related the use case. So that also is like super exciting. I would let Anpanman talk about the technical details about all the different spectrums of Ligado and other details. I'm not that great in that aspect. Yeah, I think Anpanman and Cat C are super deep in it.
Yeah, I do apologize. I'm really bad about like driving Liam down a rabbit hole because I just get excited. We get guests down here and Liam's like, all right, mate, we're going to do this and this and this. And I'm like, no, we're not. I'm going to ask questions. Leave me alone. No, man, I already got to have you guys back on. I mean, there's no way we're going to cover this, and I'm apologize. There's if you guys in the chats, we do got to jump in there soon. But I know a lot of you know everything about this company inside and out, and you're probably just like, these guys are idiots. But no offense, it's not for everyone that knows everything about ASTS or Rocket Lab. We do this for the newer investors. We're doing it to help educate, help people learn. So hopefully there's people that aren't so intimidated and they just ask. It's good to ask those basic questions. That's how we learn. That's what makes us helps us make educated decisions when it comes to investing. And that's what it is. It doesn't matter if you're investing in a Rocket Lab or a Redwire or Tesla. It doesn't matter. It's getting the information, getting the right information. So yeah, sorry about the rabbit hole. I do apologize. I'll do it probably 3 or 4 more times, but I'll try and limit myself. Again, you guys are great.
What's your question?
Well, the spectrum thing, okay. And so let's say hypothetically you are a Rocket Lab investor, which I know you're not. Let's say you are, and I'm sure you're already familiar with the flatellite coming out for them. So this will be interesting. So let's take it from a guy from your end, your AST guy. What would
Adam King,
you see?
shout out, thank you.
Thanks, Adam, dude. That's awesome. That's awesome. And we're gonna get to the comments really soon, I promise. But what do you see? And we're not gonna hold you to this, man. We don't expect any numbers. You don't have to bring receipts, and trust me, no one's gonna bother you about it. But if you're looking at something like that, what would be a good play for Rocket Lab? What direction? Because they're not really focused on that sector too much, but we know they build their own satellites and everything that goes along with that. But now they're trying to do a bit more. Is Spectrum, is that kind of thing, is that great for long term, or do you think there's gonna be something else that comes down the pipe that could possibly work just as well?
Well, so I think you got to look at the landscape, right? First of all, if you're talking about terrestrial spectrum, the stuff that makes your cell phone work so well, and that's primarily for coverage, that's low band, which is 600 to 900 megahertz, and then mid band, which is anywhere between 1.5 gigahertz to let's say 2.5 gigahertz. Low band is good for coverage, propagation. It goes through walls. If you live in New York, it's what will give you coverage down in the subway, and so that's great. And that's a very finite resource. There's really not any low band spectrum available for purchase, and if you were able to buy it, it would be really, really expensive. And that's something that the MNOs, it's kind of their core scarce asset. Like they will hold on to that with kung fu grip and never let go of that. Mid-band spectrum is what gives you it doesn't have the same characteristics of coverage or propagation, but it can carry more data because of the frequencies are smaller, like it or closer together. It can allow you to have more capacity. And so when you have a spectrum, you kind of if you're providing service, you kind of build it like a cake, where the low band spectrum gives you coverage, and then mid band spectrum gives you a lot of data throughput, and then beyond that, going even higher, then you get into areas where, for example, like Starlink uses millimeter band spectrum for its direct to the terminal home internet service, right? And that one carries a lot of data, but you've got to pinpoint that satellite directly at satellites overhead. There can't be too much in terms of like clouds or rain. Like it doesn't have as good propagation or coverage, but it can carry a ton of data, right? And so so those are different types of spectrum, and if you were trying to build this kind of from scratch, this is where Abella and AST SpaceMobile came up with an ingenious approach. Back in the day, Aridium, when they tried to launch their service, they not only did they go out and try to build the satellites, but they went to go buy and purchase spectrum, and they went through the regulatory rigmarole of having approval to use that all around the world. And that's back when there was spectrum that you could go pursue and purchase at an expensive price, but not an extraordinary price. However, that company Iridium tried to be the vertically integrated soup to nuts provider. They were like, hey, we're going to go directly market to customers. We're going to spend money to try to get new customers. We're going to build this phone, which, by the way, our satellites are going to have a small phased array, which I think was like their satellites have a phased array that's 1.5 by 1.5 meters, whereas AST SpaceMobile, the next generation Bluebirds, are going to be 15 by 15 meters, much bigger. You know, the size of a basically the half size of a basketball court. But you know, there's the physics behind that is if you have a small phased array in space, you need to have a large antenna and high-powered antenna for your phone down here for it to communicate. And so, you know, Iridium built these large clunky satellite phones. They also built these satellites and they launched them into space. They did that back in the time when sending a kilogram of weight into space was what, like $100,000 or so, whereas that's, you know, that's gone down to a few $1,000s. But they you know, they bought Spectrum, they built like a sales organization, they spent money on marketing, they did all these things that were not sustainable and obviously went bankrupt. Whereas AST SpaceMobile came up with this idea, hey, we're not going to go compete against the carriers, we're actually going to go partner with them. We're going to be able to do that by, one, we're going to split the revenues with them. They already own the customer, they have the install base, and we're going to leverage that install base. Like the person that we're going to sell to can use their existing phone to connect with our satellites. And the way we can do that is we're going to build these huge phased arrays that are going to orbit in low Earth orbit. They're going to have enough power to connect with your phone, and they're going to have strong enough receiving abilities to hear that faint signal. I think your cell phone has I forget the exact wattage, but it's very low. And so you need a very large phased array in order to communicate with an unmodified phone. And so their novel approach was that we're going to leverage this massive existing install base. We're going to work with the MNOs. They're going to service and sell our and support this service, and they're going to also contribute their spectrum, meaning we're going to work with the carriers, and we're going to leverage their low band spectrum in areas where it's not being used properly. And so this is like the secret sauce behind the business model, where it's like AST is going to focus on what they know and what they know best, which is building these large satellites, connecting them with users on the ground, and then being able to integrate that into the core of the MNO's network. And then the MNO is going to do all the sales, marketing, service support. They're going to provide their spectrum. They're also, by the way, going to go through the regulatory hoops for us. So Verizon and AT&T are going to go to bat for us at the FCC. Imagine like a startup company trying to do this, which is what Aridium did. You know, was it 3 decades ago, or 30 years ago, where they basically went to the regulators and said, hey, we're going to go try to launch this new service, trust us, at the FCC. And it was a brutal process. Not only did they do that at the FCC, but they did that around the world in all these different countries where they wanted to provide service. Whereas here, AST is partnering with over 50 global operators who will go to bat for them at all these regulators, which is a really complex and difficult process. I mean, that's part of the moat that the company enjoys today, which is, you know, getting through that regulatory process and you know, and having these large wireless carriers go to bat for you. And so Spectrum, if you can imagine, like that's a hard resource to get a hold of. I think in my mind, when I saw the announcement for Rocket Lab, I was thinking, you know, perhaps like they might build satellites for other companies, similar to what, as you know, like MDA Space is building the current and the next generation constellation for Globalstar. And MDA Space, I think, also builds Iridium satellites. But I think if you listen to you know, Sir Peter Beck and the management team, like it seems like they have ambitions beyond just that. So maybe they do want to get into the services business as well, meaning they'll launch a constellation, which, you know, if you own a constellation, that's a ton of CapEx, right? It's going to require a lot of upfront investment. And then can they leverage that constellation? Will someone use it, right? And the key question is like, if that's what they're going to do, they're going to need to get access to someone's spectrum, which, you know, there's been some speculation that maybe EchoStar will lease out their spectrum to someone. But it's not just on the user links, which is, you know, connecting to your phone or device. You also need feeder links, meaning that satellite needs to connect with the ground station. And so that process with the FCC, I mean, Chairman Carr has shown that he's pretty aggressive in expediting, the regulatory process. But when you apply for feeder links, whether that's Ka, Ku band or QV band, this is all really high, 50 gigahertz, 40 gigahertz type of spectrum. That process takes several years. And so if a key sign to see if Rocket Lab is going to go down this path of actually being a service provider of broadband or whatever type of connectivity is to see when those FCC filings will pop up about them pursuing feeder links, which we haven't seen yet. But if they do, you're looking at a timeline of, call it 2, 3, potentially 5, 6 years. But I don't know. I mean, with car, that timeline could get reduced pretty quickly. The other area that I thought, so that's on the commercial side. The other area that I thought where Rocket Labs could pursue is basically government contracts, right? So whether that's Golden Dome or the SDA, the various tranches that they're rolling out, there's probably work for Rocket Lab to do there, which would be military communications, but because the military already owns spectrum, and so they just need satellites to go help utilize that spectrum. So that seems like a logical place to potentially go after as well. But yeah, those are like some initial thoughts. I mean, I think for if you're a Rocket Lab investor, an important question you want to ask yourself is, if they build hardware has a certain margin. It is one-off, but then there's potentially some maintenance around it. But over the long run, like that's not a very high gross margin type of business. However, if you go into services like have recurring cash flow, revenue and cash flow, that can be more attractive, but then that requires a lot more upfront capex, right? So if you're going to launch and service a constellation, you're probably looking at a few $1 billion to do that. And that was always part of the bear case against AST SpaceMobile when they went public. It's like, oh my God, where are they going to get all this money to fund the constellation, which is going to be several $1 billion, which I think AST SpaceMobile investors learned painfully that over time, the company had to raise money. Some of it not at great prices, but then they also got strategic investment from Google, AT&T, Vodafone, Verizon, and they're pursuing other avenues of funding as well. But yeah, if you do go down that path, it is expensive, but then the rewards can be pretty tremendous if there's a market for it.
I have 3 pages of notes, handwritten 3 pages of notes, dude. Slow down, all right? I'm the village idiot here. I'm trying to keep up. That was amazing. That's exactly what we have you guys on, man. This is brilliant. I loved every second of that. I understand a lot more than I did coming in here. That's why we do this. That was awesome. Thanks for that so much.
I need to jump across to the chats because there's just this thing inside me that I haven't addressed them yet. So we have Jacob Keaton. Let's go. Jacob says, I want to know what is Anpanman's second favorite space company? Anpanman.
What's my second favorite space company? Let's see.
SpaceX.
No, it's Blue Origin. I mean, if you're talking about like publicly traded, I don't know. I mean, I like Rocket Lab and I like Redwire. I'm just so all in on AST. It's kind of hard because I don't spend as much time on some of these other names. I mean, I've been invested in Rocket Lab, Redwire, Black Sky from time to time. I think there's positives about all those companies. There's also, just like any investment, there's also risks as well. But I guess I would say my second favorite company is Black Sky, because I think they're doing some pretty cool things around Earth observation, which I think is a 4-letter word for most people, because that whole area I think hasn't taken off as much as people expected. But if you look at the company's gross margins and their next
Black Sky
generation of
don't count.
satellites,
Black Sky don't count. That's another satellite company. You can't cheat and do another satellite company, man.
Yeah,
That's cheating. That's
I'll
cheating.
just finish
That's
by
cheating,
saying
man.
that they
I'm teasing.
they have a unique approach, and I think especially the advent of contested space and obviously like intelligence, having a really capable Earth observation, and if you look at their their financials, I mean, most of their business is from the U.S. government, and that can keep. I mean, a majority of it is. I think that's a pretty interesting company because they've got great gross
No
margins, and
doubt. No
as they
doubt, man.
leverage their financial model builds out, I think they'll become more and more profitable. But I
I
like
think
Rocket Lab. I
actually,
like Redwire.
no, yeah, I think Jacob actually likes Black Sky as well.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, and because they work with Rocket Lab, we started paying more attention to them. I remember they were down in the twos, and I wanted to buy, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm an idiot for not buying. And now, you look at it, I'm like, yeah, Chris is an idiot. Another reason to have you guys on so we don't make these mistakes over and over.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is fun, man. Let's get back in the chat. You guys are great.
So Stock Meetups actually addressed the chat and said, great to see Jacob Keaton join the chat. He is a great host of many space talks. And guys, if you haven't, make sure to check out Jacob's Spaces. They run every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Look, absolutely
They got
amazing.
Ashley Vance
Open
on this
forum.
week. Ashley Vance will be on this Wednesday, guys. So don't miss
that's
out on
right.
that. Yep.
Then
See,
Jackie,
yeah,
go on.
see the main thing what so people gets confused. I mean, since I come from a different tech world, I see in a different the zoom of lens is Black Sky is solving a imagery real-time problem, right? And Planet is also trying to do that, but Planet is a little slower in terms of the speed at which you can get the things. But Black Sky, if I'm not wrong, is able to get the image, the resolution at 3 centimeters or something like that. So it's amazing. So it was used very heavily during this Iran-Israel war too, right?
And what would be your second favorite space company, Stock Meetups?
Mine is Rocket Lab because I feel I wanted to invest in SpaceX in the private investments.
That's my boy.
Somehow, yeah.
That's my boy. Be my boy, Blue. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, so I also admire the efforts of Peter because he's also a founder CEO. Most of the time, I like the companies which are founder CEO, except SoFi, which was not a founder led. But I trust Antonio Noto for his things. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And then we have Jackie's has said an Instagram post by AST SpaceMobile board member Adriana. You love getting me with the names, brother. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it. Featuring herself, Jeff Bezos, and AST CEO Abel. What is that? Avalon has fueled speculation.
Yeah.
Has fueled speculation about a potential partnership. That is why it popped. Do you two guys agree on that?
Well, I mean, the companies are already working together, right? Because Blue Origin is one of the launch services providers for AST, and there's a big debate as to how quickly New Glenn is going to come up for cadence, and will they be able to service AST properly in the coming months? But yeah, they work together. I mean, what was interesting is that what was it? So Blue Origin executives were at the company's headquarters in Miami the week prior. This is maybe it was like 4 or 5 weeks ago, and there was a picture of all of them together. And then the week immediately thereafter, there Adriana Cisneros, who is on the AST SpaceMobile board, her family runs a very large media empire in Latin America. Their family is well known for bringing direct TV service to South America, which became a huge business for DirecTV. So they're very familiar with satellite technologies or whatever. But she's on the board. She's also on the nominating committee as well. But yeah, she posted on her Instagram this photo which said, "Congratulations, AST SpaceMobile and Blue Origin," or she said congrats or something like that. And there's a picture of her in between Abella Avalon and Jeff Bezos. And so that got the speculative juices running of like, what is she saying congrats about? Because they're already working together. And so why would they be at the company's Blue Origin's Kent office in Washington for this meeting where this board member specifically attended, which is a bit odd. So is there, some of the speculation was whether perhaps, Jeff Bezos or Amazon or Blue Origin, maybe they might make a strategic investment in AST, or perhaps they're working some other type of partnership. But that did get some level of speculation going. the other thing I would say is that the company recently retired half of its convertible bonds, which were deep in the money, and they really didn't have to do that, to be honest. They paid a small premium to retire those bonds, and so when you look at the company's cap structure, why would they create some space there? No pun intended. Was that in preparation for a potential, strategic investment? They did have a strategic convertible where Vodafone, Verizon, and AT&T and Google were invested last January 2024, which then was converted to equity, and that went away. And then, of course, the convert that they raised with institutional investors in this past January, 460 million, they just retired half of that. And so, where they didn't need to. And so, some of the speculation is maybe perhaps, Amazon or Jeff Bezos or Blue Origin might make an investment. There's also been some chatter that the company has met with Microsoft, and obviously they're already working with Google. And we saw the information article, I guess it was a month ago, about Apple being very unhappy with Starlink, and also being unhappy with Globalstar. And so that's gotten a lot of speculation going. I don't know how much of that is built into the stock price versus all the different catalysts that are coming up, but yeah, it's anyone's guess, like
think-
what that meeting meant, if anything.
Yeah, I think in the month of June 8 to 13, there were a lot of news which came at the same time, which actually propelled the stock. I think that's my personal view. One, there was a inclusion of Russell 1000. The second thing was the ASIC chip was completed. They were able to productionize it. It increases the data capacity by 10x to 120 Mbps. It can now support 120 Mbps. Then on June 12th itself, there was a FCC filing for SCS for AT&T/Verizon. On June 13th, there was a spectrum deal with Legato and Viasat for 45 megahertz, and also the court also kind of semi-approved overall this whole process. And all of these things, along with some of the FCC approvals, and then the recent testing of the Fairwinds, everything added up. Right? So all the news came at the similar time frame, like within the span of 2 weeks. Everything added up. It moved the needle faster.
Thank you so much. And then what I want to say, guys, anyone in the chat, I'm about to ask a ridiculous question. I want to show that no question is a stupid question, but I did run a poll while Anpanman and Start Meetups were talking, and I asked were you guys invested in ASTS. 55% of you are heavy in, 25% of you are a little in, and 18% are just learning about ASTS. So I want to pedal back a little bit because we're getting a little technical for any of the guys that have never heard of them before. We're talking about Starlink, we're talking about Blue Origin. We can sort of tie Project Kuiper into that. How would you differentiate ASTS from the likes of a Starlink or a Project Kuiper?
From me, I will explain the layman terms, and
Yep.
Penman can explain the details.
Yeah.
For me, how I perceive ASTS with others is, I feel the Global Star, MSAT, Starlink, Kuiper, maybe whenever like Rocket Lab comes into picture, right? They are focused more on solving the broadband problem, right? And sometimes there are some of the SATs which are working with Apple and AT&T to use on your iPhone, but like none of them works. I mean, you might have tested it out too. ASTS, on the other hand, in a simple layman terms, it's trying to complement the dead zones by having the space tower, the cell towers in the space. It's not broadband. It's a different. You are extending your cell towers into the space with phased with the huge phased antennas, right? And like whenever you are trying to switch between, as you're traveling, it will automatically change to get your coverage from the ASTS satellites. That's how I foresee in the layman terms.
Yeah, I mean the difference between what Starlink. So there's a. But I guess we have to separate the market in two areas. One is fixed wireless, and that's what Starlink's core business is today, and that's what Kuiper is pursuing, which is delivering broadband to a fixed terminal, right? So that requires that you have a dish that's either on a roof or you carry around a Starlink Mini, which is still a pretty, maybe it's the size of a notebook computer. You need to have a pretty decent amount of power connected to that. But that's intended to provide wireless internet to your home, right? And so whether that could compete with cable, with fiber, but that's the key market that Starlink is focused on today. The other market is called direct to device, and in particular, what Starlink direct to cell and what AST SpaceMobile are doing is that they are trying to provide you with broadband service directly to your unmodified mobile phone, right? And so that is in AST and Starlink's case, when you move out of coverage from a terrestrial tower, you will, depending on the architecture, you will either get picked up and it will automatically switch you over to that network, which would be AST SpaceMobile, or or it could be, I guess, a roaming network like Starlink. And they will provide you with data connectivity, which Starlink today for direct to cell offers, sporadic text messaging, but eventually they want to get to the point where they can offer data and voice. And for AST SpaceMobile, from day one, once they do deploy the service, they're hoping to provide broadband. Broadband meaning probably something on the order of, call it 10 to 30 megabits per second per user. And then depending on how many users are within a cell, that could go up or go down. Once the network is densified and you have multiple satellites overhead, they hope to get those speeds up to 750 megabits per second within a cell. And that cell means like, call it a 24-kilometer radius area where multiple users will save that or share that amount of capacity. But this is not a broadband replacement. This is to complement that, as Stock Meetup said. The other thing I would say, though, is that the company, outside of using the cellular spectrum of partners, they did sign this transaction to basically have 80-year usage rights for Legato, which has 40 to 45 megahertz of spectrum that covers the United States and also Canada. And so by utilizing that spectrum, they're actually going to be able to provide additional broadband capacity in areas where there is no coverage and in areas where there is coverage. And so if you can imagine, AST SpaceMobile will, like, if at a football game, if AT&T and Verizon networks are inundated and you're not getting good coverage, you can actually connect to AST SpaceMobile Legato service through your carrier, AT&T or Verizon, and get additional broadband service. And 45 megahertz is actually that's a pretty meaty amount of spectrum that's, by the way, not being used today. As folks may or may not know, Legato's currently going through a bankruptcy, and part of the exit plan is to work with AST SpaceMobile, which is why the company was able to set up the economics very attractively in order to utilize that spectrum. But yeah, when people who don't know AST SpaceMobile say, "Oh, Starlink's going to crush them," and that it's a competing service, it's not. Starlink's core business is not competing with AST SpaceMobile. Their core business is actually competing with the cable guys and also the wireless carriers too, which is partially why, for example, from a business model perspective, Starlink has this kind of weird place where I think a lot of MNOs like Verizon, AT&T, they don't trust Starlink because Starlink, that core business of fixed wireless competes with, for example, the 5G home internet business that AT&T and Verizon have, right? And also their fiber businesses. And so over the long run, it is a strategic question for T-Mobile because Starlink ultimately, I think, is going to pursue T-Mobile's customers and try to take them for their core business. And then if they do indeed launch a competitive wireless business, for example, working with EchoStar, that's going to put T-Mobile in a really, really weird place. And so, yeah, it's an interesting time to be invested in this area. And I think, and most importantly, like, people should understand that just like the cell tower business, I think there's going to be 2 to 3 winners in this area, and it's the economics are supportive of a duopoly or an oligopoly, and there's not going to be just one winner, or it's unlikely. And so But as we all will learn in economics, it's good to be part of an oligopoly or duopoly. And so I think ultimately, Starlink will fix some of their technological issues, but they still will have some of the business model, conflicts with the MNOs, which is why, today I think Starlink has signed 9 MNOs globally. Many of those are really small ones, whereas AST has signed, 53 MNOs globally, which represent 3.2 billion subscribers. Starlink, I think their MNOs represent somewhere around 250 million subscribers, and so there's a big difference there.
Hey,
Thank you so
Liam.
much for that.
Hey, Liam.
Go on.
I've got like I'm going on page 5.5 of questions for this guy after we're done. If you ask him one more question, I swear to you, that was awesome. I was just sitting here just writing as fast as possible, man. Thank you so much, bro. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
This is stock meetups. Back to what we were saying earlier, that was on point as well. I don't know about you guys, man, but I'm having a lot of fun. I'm learning a whole lot. I know there's a lot more in the chats, but it's just what I do. I just interrupt and just say a lot of ridiculous stuff, and But again, man, thanks. This is a lot of fun.
See, I mean, we can best guesstimate, right? So there would be few winners in terms of the launchers, right? One is, SpaceX. The other one is Rocket Lab. In terms of connectivity, we have ASTS, we have Starlinks, we have possibly, Kuiper and Rocket Lab. In terms of, we don't know yet. And there would be some folks possibly from China and other folks. You never know. But we think we are closer, but you never know. There could be some risks and uncertainty for any stocks you invest or any of the companies. You do
Can I ask
your
a stupid question? I'm sorry. I just something to me. Can I ask a stupid question about Spectrum? Is that okay? So I mean, again, I'm new. Talk to me like I'm a stupid puppy, or I'm a dumb dog. Are there other countries that have something similar to a Spectrum, or do they own their own type of Spectrum outside the U.S. and U.S.-based companies?
So for cellular spectrum, most of it is owned by various operators in those specific countries. What's interesting about L-band and S-band spectrum is that not all of it is used. And so in Europe, there's actually L-band spectrum, I believe, that's coming up for I don't think it's a traditional auction, but operators are going to be encouraged to apply to use that spectrum, which is why I think AST SpaceMobile formed a joint venture with Vodafone, because they wanted to have a European entity to go pursue not only other carriers to offer the service throughout Europe, but also to pursue that spectrum that's coming up for, I guess I'll just say auction. But yeah, there is other spectrum out there globally, that MSS spectrum. This is satellite spectrum. Like Omnispace is a company that owns a bunch of spectrum, S-band spectrum in a bunch of different regions, which interestingly is owned by Cerberus. Fortress, which is an investor and stakeholder in Legato. And so some of those connections kind of already exist. And so in the future, you could see AST pursue more S-band and L-band spectrum globally, which will help augment the broadband service that they're delivering to the MNOs.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I've got more questions on that, but don't have time for that today. But I will be definitely DMing you like as soon as we get off here, because I've got like 10 more. Thank you. Thank you.
And then get into VAST CNC. VAST CNC, and I'm going to ask the two of you guys this. Is there any industries you watch outside of space?
I am generally also keen on the fintech space. I watch the companies like SoFi, Pagaya, Robinhood.
Which would you be bigger in? I know it was quite controversial at the time between Robinhood and SoFi. I actually asked this to Matt Money yesterday. Is that whole competition still there between SoFi and Robinhood, or have they more or less separated themselves now?
Personally, whatever Robinhood has done, the stock got like valued,
Yeah.
Whatever SoFi has done, they built all the building blocks. They are yet to re-rate the value for SoFi, right? So SoFi, everyone values. There are a lot of banks who and their analysts, they always give a sell rating for some reason because they always treat it as a bank. Actually, SoFi powers a lot of these fintechs, including Robinhood, Day, Monza, Moneyline. And for example, even they have announced right now that they are going to also get into blockchain and crypto and also the worldwide the transfers. And with Galileo Financial Technologies, which they own, they are going to provide all these capabilities as a service to all other fintechs and banks. So far we can talk for 2 hours. That could be another, the live stream. Um, and and everyone understands that Robinhood has its own place, right? So they are the best in terms of investing. But SoFi, on the other hand, are really good in terms of platform. But their growth has been a little slower because of all the interest rates and everything, whatever happened. Um, I personally believe that they will have a huge cusp of the next phase or next wave, how things are moving. But that's my personal belief.
For me, I'm a generalist by heart, so I pretty much look across all sectors. If there's interesting investment ideas, then I'll dig deeper. But I've had investments in tech, fintech, healthcare, industrials, any number of areas. But yeah, I think space though is my favorite right now.
Right. So I know we're a bit tight on time here. So here at Rocket Lab Daily, what we normally do, we have 2 questions, one from Chris and one from myself. Chris's one is normally a little bit more directed at the company. Mine is a bit of a random one. Chris, what do you want to ask the guys? You're muted, my joy.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was muted. Yeah, so I know we're a little bit muted, or slow on, or sorry, again, we're a little bit tight on time. So I'm not gonna bother with stock meetups. I already know his answer, most likely, but so I'm gonna ask Anpanman. Let's see if we can, let's try and convert him over to a Rocket Lab investor. Let's have him, I'm just kidding. No, but honestly, you mentioned EcoStar earlier. I know you know about the Haste program. You mentioned the possibility of use with Spectrum and the Golden Dome, and we did learn that Spectrum does have in other countries it can be used, and because of the fact that Rocket Lab is now teaming up with the ESA, we already know that Haste is going to be in the UK, that's other world. Since you're more of a satellite guy, if there's a catalyst that you would look for that would say, yeah, this is probably something I'm ready to invest in. From that perspective, what would it take for you? And then we're not going to hold you to it, but what would it take for you to invest in Rocket Lab?
Yeah, I mean, I've invested in the company from time to time. I think it's for me, just being invested in a launch provider has been tough. But obviously they've branched out into other areas to become more of an end-to-end space company. But I think if they're able to get Neutron off to a good start and build a cadence there, and they're able to basically build out a more more apps that can leverage that larger launch platform and then get additional customers, I think the story becomes more interesting. But I think for me, if the company can articulate a future where gross margins can get above kind of mid-30s, I think it becomes a more interesting investment story. But it's like a great company and they've accomplished a lot, and there's a lot in the future on the come for them. But I think for me, the key thing is making if they're able to get the gross margins up based off of these new applications, that's what would make it a lot more interesting from my perspective.
Thank
Brilliant.
you so much for that, my guy. And then
Brilliant.
I know you're tight on time, so I'm going to ask you your question first, and then we'll get straight to stock meetups. So, Anpanman, would you rather travel to the Andromeda Galaxy on a round trip, and when you got back, everyone you know is gone? Or would you rather travel to Mars on a one-way trip with only 2 people of your choice?
I think that's pretty easy. I like humans, so I would take the latter. That seems pretty dystopian to go travel so far out by yourself and then come back and no one's around. I'd rather be with companions on a one-way trip to Mars. So that one seems pretty easy. So I would take that choice.
Thank you so much for that. Guys,
Yeah, you're welcome.
if you came from the eVTOL space, you came from the Rocket Lab space, and you haven't heard of ASTS, make sure to follow Anpanman on X. And same with Start Meetups. Start Meetups seems to be a wealth of knowledge, not only in ASTS, but you've heard them there with the fintech industry as well. And we will be having these guys on a lot more regularly. But now, Stock Meetups. Would you rather have to explain round Earth theory to a whole world of flat Earth thinkers? Or would you rather live on a flat Earth?
I would rather live on a flat earth because most of the people it's very hard to explain and convince. And I work a lot on data and AI in my company.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I keep explaining for people to get, and it's really hard to convince them. Everyone has their own mindset.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Guys, I hope
Yeah,
you've had an awful lot of fun here. My name's Liam. I am one of the Hustle Brothers here. I'm here with my good friend, Christopher Bell, founder of the Haste Club. We have spoke about ASTS. I would love to have the guys on again if they'd be up for it. Anpanman, Start Meetups. Have you any final closing thoughts for the guys?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And hopefully it's just helpful for folks. And yeah, I enjoy talking about AST SpaceMobile and just, and other names as well. But yeah, I hope this was helpful for anyone who's interested in the name, who is skeptical, or maybe that, just curious about learning more about the future of connectivity. So thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, no problem at all. And then Start Meetups. Any closing remarks?
I learn so much from all of you. It's been a wonderful ride so far. And I'm really cheering for all the stocks, Rocket Lab, ASTS, RDW, the BKSY and Planet and Lunar. So everyone needs to do well. Yeah, I really wish all the best for everyone.
I love it.
Guys,
That's exactly why we have these guys on. You guys are amazing. We barely touched the surface tonight, and we can go a lot deeper. And if you guys are willing to come on again, happy to have you on. Lots of fun. Many, many, many things.
Yeah, let's do it again. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for hosting us. Awesome.
guys, if you haven't, make sure to bang that subscribe button. If you like how aggressive we're going in this whole industry, just getting all the big names on, please do let us know in the comments below. But finally, make sure to follow Anpanman and Stock Meetups on X. Right, guys, until tomorrow.